Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's audio discussion. We will go over the recently signed economic and security agreement between Turkey and Somalia. In this discussion, we shall present the context of the agreement with a focus on regional geopolitics, geoeconomics, and the implications for Western businesses. In this discussion, we have Bhargav Reddy, the Regional Director at APAC Assistance, Dr. Ramu, a Senior Geopolitical Analyst at APAC Assistance, and myself, Sitati Wasilwa, an Information Services Manager for Europe, Middle East, and Africa at APAC Assistance. And to kick off this discussion, it will be premature for us to jump into the implications of the agreement without going over the background. So at this stage, maybe Bhargav, you want to paint a broad brush of the background to this discussion.
All right. Thank you, Sitati. It would be an understatement to state here that Turkey's foreign policy has been proactive and exuberant, if not ambitious. Turkey has been involving itself on multiple fronts, in fact, multiple war fronts, mainly in Libya and closer to their own borders in Armenia. And Armenia's involvement has been quite chaotic and controversial. In the same vein, Turkey has been proactive in the Horn of Africa or Eastern Africa as well. And they have concluded an agreement for economic cooperation and defense. And the agreement was signed on the 8th of February. There are three major aspects to this agreement. That is joint counterterrorism efforts and cooperation. The second being military and financial assistance, and joint military training and exercise. Turkey's involvement has been quite popular in some of the Islamic countries in humanitarian capacity, and they've also involved themselves in diplomatic and elemental activities as well, primarily in Taliban-ruled Afghanistan as well as Somalia traditionally. And we can see that the overarching hallmark of the agreement is to operationalize the three major aspects which I just mentioned, while at the same time, we need to understand the bilateral agreement is to focus primarily on building capacity at the governmental level to strengthen their humanitarian efforts in the region. At the same time, also operationalize some of the non-governmental agencies which have been working in the region based out of Turkey. Now, to move further, Sitati, can you also talk about how Turkey has made inroads and what's the geostrategic objectives?
Yes, at the basis of Turkey's foreign policy, specifically to mention its inroads to Somalia, are four, broad geostrategic objectives. And the first objective is to scale up the Turkish, economic interest and market diversification in the East African region and across the Horn of Africa region. The other objective is to intervene in conflicts and post-conflict development in the region. And the third objective is to enhance cultural heritage by promoting Islamic solidarity. And the last objective is to achieve global visibility based on the international and regional geopolitical and geoeconomic dynamics that are taking shape. So to better understand the dynamics of Turkey's involvement in Somalia, Ankara has been instrumental in building the capacity of the Somali National Army, of course, in partnership with other foreign powers, for instance, the United States and the European Union. And just to take you back a little bit, Turkey established a military base in Mogadishu in 2017, which is not only a facility for training elite military units, but is also Ankara's military outpost in the region. And to finish off on this is that Turkey's continued military presence in Somalia is largely tied to the persisting threat of terrorism by the Al-Shabaab militant group. Further to this, there are two primary factors which we need to take into account as far as the recently signed defense and economic agreement is concerned. And the first factor is that Turkiye seeks to build and develop Somalia's maritime security and defense capabilities. And based on this, from November last year up until at least January this year, both Turkey and Somalia, started having conversations on designing at least a framework where Turkey would train and at the same time equip Somalia's naval force and help to patrol Somalia's coastline. And just for your information, I mean, Somalia's coastline is the longest in Africa, measuring approximately 3,333 kilometers. To finish off on the second factor that led to the defense and economic agreement, the regional tensions, which are perceived to endanger Somalia's sovereignty and interests. And just to put this into context, is that 2 months ago, that is in January, Ethiopia and the breakaway region of Somaliland signed a historical memorandum of understanding. And through this MOU, Ethiopia would at least get a 50-year lease on a strip of land on Somaliland's Red Sea coast for naval and commercial maritime use, as well as access the Berbera port that is along the Red Sea. The MOU would also enable Somaliland to acquire shares in Ethiopian Airlines, in addition to Ethiopia recognizing Somaliland as a sovereign state. So these elevated tensions between Mogadishu and Addis Ababa, given the fact that Addis Ababa, given the fact that Somalia doesn't really recognize the sovereignty claims of Somaliland. And maybe just to wind off this bit of the primary factors that gave rise to the agreement, I'd want to maybe rope in Ramu, who can maybe give us finer details on some of the alliances that have emerged regionally as far as these tensions and diplomatic engagements are concerned. Dr. Ramu?
Thank you, Sitati. I would rather like to just flag off on this issue because it's more of a generic understanding about how alliance building have taken place in the Saharan region of Africa, as well as parts of East Africa and the Horn of Africa. So regional alliances have emerged with regard to the rising tensions between Somalia and Ethiopia that you had just mentioned, Sitati. So the UAE, Ethiopia, and the Somaliland, the de facto independent Somaliland, are on the same axis that way. On the other side, you have Somalia, you have Eritrea, Egypt, and Saudi Arabia. Again, aligned against this particular, sort of a regional, forum or regional. It's not a proper alliance, but yeah, it's kind of like a loose makeup of countries. So probably I think I would like to prompt Bhargav here, if you could actually give us some perspective about the regional security and economic implications of this particular defense agreement between Turkey and Somalia. Bhargav?
So certainly. So the primary implication which is expected from such an agreement would be a positive one from a security standpoint along the Somali coastline. The Somali coastline has been quite controversial and has been quite plagued with piracy for the longest time. Only recently it has been subsided, while the focus has shifted more towards the belligerent Houthis off the coast of Yemen. From a security standpoint, in the long term, the development of Somalian naval force would help improve the maritime security of the Somali coastline. This will further augment cooperation with foreign naval forces, including Turkey and the NATO allies that include the US and the EU, which have been quite active recently in the Red Sea area. And this could significantly cut back on the maritime threats along the Somali coastline. As I mentioned, piracy has been a major concern. Overall, the improvement in maritime and land security environment will further help Somalia rebuild their economy and foster their humanitarian efforts. And this will also try and stifle the tribal conflicts inside Somalia as they lose incentive to go out in the ocean and commit piracy. So I would round it off there. Ramu, would you like to elaborate on the energy interests?
Quite certainly, Bhargav. Yeah, so when we talk about this agreement, so it's basically a defense agreement with emphasis on maritime security. But yeah, I mean, it's hard to overlook the energy interests, that are writ very clearly in this particular deal. So if you look at the history of Turkey and offshore oil exploration, I mean, it's mostly it's come out as controversial. Like the best example is what is happening in the Eastern Mediterranean. You have huge gas reserves being prospected and discovered by countries such as Israel, Cyprus, Egypt, as well as Turkey. But Turkey seems to have claimed the entire continental shelf that abounds this region as its own, which goes contrary to Cypriot claims of having their own exclusive economic zone where sizable amounts of natural gas has been discovered. So as being the so-called bad boy in terms of its own regional neighborhood, it's a rather opportunistic move on the part of Turkey as well as Turkish, oil companies, be it the state-owned oil and gas major, or be it even the private players that are active in Turkey, to to seize one of the unconquered or probably unexploited prices in Africa, because the region, the offshore region of Somaliland, Puntland, and Jubaland, which are different regions within Somalia, are rich in oil and gas deposits. And unfortunately, it's been unexploited, not even underexploited, unexploited till date. And I don't need to elaborate on the reasons why it is so, because you have, the waters are infested by a huge piracy issue. You have militancy going on with the Al-Shabaab and other tribal conflicts that are happening in the subshore and onshore regions of these oil-rich basins. And it is no coincidence that way that Ankara and Mogadishu ratified an offshore oil and natural gas cooperation agreement on the 7th of March, exactly a month after the Defense Pact. The energy agreement is intergovernmental and focuses on the exploration, evaluation, development, and production of oil in Somalia's land and sea blocks. The agreement also includes the transportation, distribution, refining, sales, and services, which basically is, I wish to sum it up like, it includes the upstream, the midstream, as well as the downstream segments of oil and gas. And Turkey being an established Turkey boasting of established oil service providers too, who are competing at the levels of traditional Western oil service providers. This actually looks like a win-win agreement between both these countries. From a commercial perspective, the agreement would give Turkish energy companies an edge over Western or even Chinese firms and those of other nationalities. However, non-Turkish corporations are likely to benefit from lucrative energy-related business opportunities due to their advanced personnel and technological know-how. But quite certainly, they will face competition from Chinese firms because they are quite active. The Chinese even have a naval base in Eritrea, which actually can give security and protection to Chinese oil companies that are prospective for resources in the Eastern African and Horn of Africa regions. Other Western and regional powers, for example, UAE and Saudi Arabia, could also lobby and present energy cooperation deals to Somalia, especially if security risks dissipate owing to the improvement in maritime security. Now, let's just move on to the more critical non-energy part of this agreement. And I think, Sitati, you would be the right person to chime in and give us a broader overview about what is happening on the non-energy front. So over to you, Sitati.
Yes, Dr. Ramu, many thanks for that. With regard to the development of critical non-energy infrastructure, I mean, Turkey already has, taken some active role in the reconstruction or even putting up some newer infrastructural projects in Somalia. One of them being the, repair works and expansion of the Aden International Airport, formerly known as the Mogadishu International Airport. But apart from that, agreements for the development of other massive non-energy infrastructure projects are likely to follow the Defense and Economic Cooperation Agreement. And based on this, Somalia's stability and reconstruction would therefore provide a conducive environment for the development of roads, bridges, railway lines, airports, as well as seaports. And an important point to mention at this point is that Turkish companies would have a head start in winning bids for the development of key infrastructure. However, non-Turkish firms, including Western Chinese companies, still stand a chance given the advanced technologies, institutional capacities, as well as global and regional exposure. So before I wind it up, I mean, it's critical to largely, I mean, reflect on Turkey's foreign policy in Africa. And I think just apart from Somalia, other countries that depict, Turkey's growing influence in Africa is Libya. I can't think of any other example, I mean, vivid example apart from Libya. I don't know if, Bhargav, you have something to mention to that, maybe briefly for a minute or two before we wind it up.
Certainly, Sitati, thank you for that. We will follow up this discussion with an elaborate assessment report. Sitati, please follow that up with Ramu and Fatima on our team. Now, further adding to your point about Turkey's ambitious interests, especially Libya, they have been quite belligerent to ensure that there is a stable governance, primarily because it's their sphere of influence. It comes as no surprise that Turkey has been quite proactive and expansionary in their foreign policy, especially under Erdogan, because they struggle within the Islamic world with Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Iran, for influence within the Islamic spectrum. And North Africa has been the theater where Egypt and Saudi Arabia have been backing some of the authoritarian sectarian rulers, while Turkey has been strengthening a more popular Islam, or rather political Islam brand of politics in North Africa, which is largely populist and more democratic in nature rather than overly focused dictators like Haftar or even Al-Sisi for that matter. So that's been a major shift in terms of ideology as well as their modus operandi. And if I were to round off this conversation for businesses, the interest in the Horn of Africa and Eastern Africa, as well as the expanded Red Sea region, they should not hesitate to reach out to us for bespoke and focused risk assessments. We can certainly help them with finer details of some of these agreements, which may actually help them in exploring opportunities as more and more business activities undertaken, especially in the energy sector, like Ramu elaborated. We can certainly help them out with a more focused reports. And Turkey has been pro-business, and their economy is quite strong despite some of the recent setbacks. They have close to $1 trillion in terms of their GDP. They certainly have the potential to spend as well as strengthen their own economy with overseas interests in energy sector. And they have pioneered some of these aspects in the economy as well. They've got multiple pipelines going through their country, connecting Europe to the Middle East. So, with Turkey's growing interest in the region, it is only looking more positive for some of these sectors, especially energy sector. And with that, if both of you agree, we'll round off this discussion for today.
Yes, certainly. I have nothing else from my end, unless Dr. Ramu, you have anything else. We can close today's discussion at this point.
The same goes for me. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for this very vibrant and scintillating discussion.